So you can't wear shorts. Alcohol is not available in any part of the country. There are no nightclubs, no freedom of the press. Homosexuality is basically illegal. If you are ever caught having a sexual relationship with somebody of the same gender, or somebody tells you and they can prove it, then you may be stoned to death. On the other hand, you get free education. Housing and food are subsidized by the government. It has one of the lowest crime rate ever and consistently in the world. In fact, I think in the past decade, most of their prosecuted crimes, they're mostly minor offenses like theft. So the Supreme Court is probably on a 12-year vacation. So Brunei is so rich because of their oil industry that they basically don't need any money from their people. So the government don't collect income tax. They have state funds, so you contribute to the excuse me, to the state fund, which is about 5%. But education is free, housing is free. Housing is subsidized and food is subsidized. So the cost of living is very, very low. They produce a lot of oil, and this is one thing that I think I really admire about them. They produce a lot of oil, and any kind of mining is always associated with the destruction of the environment. But the country is actually 60% virgin forest. It has been unaffected by human activities. No real estate development, no any kind of industry, nothing. For the wildlife and forest remain untouched, and I've never been there. It's in my bucket list when the pandemic is over, obviously. But some of my friends who've been there said that it's just amazing how they've been able to preserve the environment, and how they've been able to take care of their environment. Pollution is almost non-existent as well. And so I think it's just proof eternal that just because you're mining doesn't mean that you won't be able to take care of the environment. They've been able to balance everything out. The roads are very, very smooth, and traffic is almost non-existent. They said that you can compare it to the likes of Singapore or Germany. I don't know if you've been to Singapore, but if you've been to Singapore, my God, the quality of the roads, traffic, they've been able to control everything. They've been able to land plan the country so that everything is accessible and stuff. The capital, Bandar Seri Begawan, they said is very, very peaceful and quiet and very, very safe, that they're not afraid to walk at like in the middle of the night. They still feel safe. But it's an interesting study because along with all of those benefits are compromises, of course. Number one is the unemployment and its connection to education, because they have one of the highest, it's a very small country, but they have one of the highest unemployment in the world, about 8%. And it's not because they don't have opportunities, there's just a great mismatch between what is required and what they can provide. So many of the students, I guess, are not really motivated to learn anything further because everything, the basics are provided, like, so they just want to enjoy life. And then you couple that with the social contract and the social belief that if you're not working for companies like Shell or the government, then you're nothing, and so they don't like it, and they're not afraid to be unemployed because the government is going to take care of them. The Sultan of Brunei, I'm going to try and pronounce his name as properly as I could, but if I mispronounce it, do know that it's not intentional. I actually had one of my friends try and coach me on how to pronounce it, so I'm pretty sure I will mispronounce it, but I'm trying my best. I do not mean to disrespect. So His Majesty Sultan Haji Hassanal Bolkiah Muizzadin Wadullah. I hope, again, I'm pretty sure I mispronounced it, but I tried my best. So just last year, he started addressing and reconfiguring and redoing the entire educational system, because he knows at some point they need to develop other industries, and they need to also reinforce other values among students, that it's just because you're not working for Shell or companies like that, it doesn't mean that you're nothing. Most of profession, like work, like farming and stuff, they just hire people from outside the country to work those because they consider that lower class. Excuse me again. So they're trying to do something about it, but right now there's still that imbalance between the demand and the supply in terms of the workforce. So the other thing is the state of emergency. Would you believe that the country is still under a state of emergency that was declared back in 1962? That's 6 decades under a state of emergency. So that's basically how they have justified how strict they are, because they're still in a state of emergency. They've allowed no opposition and no independent civil society, basically. So the media can't report things freely, and if they do, they run the risk of being closed by the government, being shut down by the government. Then one of the most controversial is the LGBTQ rights. It's basically illegal in the country to be a homosexual. Now, there's another phase to that, but basically if you're caught having a sexual relationship or somebody tells you, and they can actually prove it, that you're having same-sex, you can't have same-sex marriage, but if you're having sex with the same gender, then you may be stoned to death. There was an uproar in Hollywood. In the Western countries, they were calling to boycott Brunei because of this law. The Sultan said that it will be enforced only to those who are caught. The other aspect of it is that there are people, so from Brunei, you can actually just cross to go to Malaysia. So some of the workers who are not Muslim, they would just cross to Malaysia to have a good time. So there they can drink, they can smoke, they can go to bars. And many of them said that I've taken this out of an article from BBC. One of the people said that one of the gay people who are actually in Brunei said they're not really bothered by the law, because for as long as you're discreet, they're actually not going to bother you. So if you're not out there being flamboyant and stuff, then you should be fine. They have not, even with people knowing that they are gay, they've not been denied of basic human rights. They've not been denied of food or education or other opportunities. So it doesn't really bother them. They wouldn't trade it for the comfort of living in Brunei. Interesting. So the other thing is vices. So you can't actually, there's no alcohol in any part of Brunei. You can't buy it there. So as I've said, you need to cross Malaysia and consume alcohol there if you want to ever consume it. But in Brunei, you can't. They said that there's this festival where you can drink rice wine. Other than that, there's no alcohol. Of course, illegal drugs, total no-no. And I don't know if you would, because obviously in the US, marijuana is not considered an illegal drug anymore, but it is there, so you can smoke it there. And so yeah, they can smoke if they cross Malaysia. I think you can't go back to Brunei smelling it. So that's the deal. Now, as I've mentioned, there's this big call. So I guess the point is that along with the restrictions, along with the comfort, enjoying free education, subsidized housing and food, and if you're unemployed, you're taken care of the government is basically taking care of you. And one of the lowest crime rates in the world. These are all comforts that we hope we enjoy here in the West and in many other Asian countries. But then there's a trade-off. Along with this is that the country have imposed such strict rules and strict standards. You don't have to be a Muslim to be there. That's one. But you do need to observe their religious practice. So you have to go and respect it, basically. So you don't have to share that and believe what they believe in, but you have to respect it. They're very, very strict. And so many of the laws are actually designed to support the religion. And then there's that suppression of many of the freedom that we enjoy here in the West and in many other Asian countries. There's the freedom of the press. We can bash the government all we want. We can bash many people are cursing the president, but there you can't do that. You can't criticize the sultan or the government. You can't just bash what the government is doing. You can't do that. You can't just say anything against their law. So we can do any kind of movie that we want. You can't do that there. I think there's some partial subsidy to their movie industry as they now try to sort of create a better movie industry in Brunei, but there's still so much restriction in what we can actually do. So expression in terms of art is also restricted. It's not as free as it is here. And then there's the LGBTQ rights. You can't marry somebody of the same gender. Homosexuality is still considered illegal. As I've said, the street, if you're discreet, then they don't really deny you of anything. They're not gonna stone you to death, even if they know that you're a homosexual. But legally, it's actually illegal. Now, I was talking to this whole ban of the campaign of Hollywood against Brunei, people calling other people to boycott Brunei, don't go there, don't support their product. And it was when I heard about it, I thought, well, we're so dependent on oil, not just the West but the whole world. We're so dependent on oil that if we really want to stand our ground and express and try and help LGBTQA plus people in Brunei, it has to go beyond calling people to boycott Brunei. Don't visit Brunei, because Brunei don't need tourist money. They don't need it. They don't even need income tax from their own people. So not buying their not visiting their country is not really going to affect their economy. It's probably loose change for the sultan. It's like so you can, and then there's just, if you really, we consume their oil. That's the point. And all this call to boycott visiting Brunei, it doesn't really do much because they don't need it. It's oil, for as long as the world is dependent on oil. In this country, everyone who's calling to boycott Brunei, you're gonna have to go beyond that. You have to stop using oil. It's basically that's the bottom line. And for as long as we're all very dependent on fossil fuel, then it doesn't really affect them. But also there's a bigger discussion that I had with a friend of mine. He's a Muslim. I've told you about him. He's one of the dearest friends I've ever had. Unfortunately, we lost contact, but I'm pretty sure we'll see each other again and get in contact. But he is one of the most broad-minded people I've ever met, and we always get into discussion, not arguments and not debates, about our own faith, because he's also interested in my faith. I'm very interested in his faith. But he's one of the people that I respect and trust so much that this is very rare for me to say, but I would not have second thoughts putting the life of my family on his hand, because I know at the end of the day he will die for my family. He will try and protect my family, and at the end of the day, that's my concern, my family. That's how much I trust him. And so in one of my discussions with him, he said that there's the bottom line is that they have their faith, and according to that faith, they live their life, and that faith has not changed. That even if their modern day life calls for something else, their Allah and His word remains the same, even if they don't like it, even if it doesn't fit the modern day lifestyle. And so beyond all of those call for liberalism and to protecting the rights of one of people and stuff, higher than that is their faith, and that's what their faith dictates. and he said that you need to learn how to it just so happened that for them their faith is above everything else. And he said that, and this is true, that at some point in the history of Christianity, homosexuality was frowned upon, and in many doctrines and in many documents it is believed that homosexuality is not supposed to be supported. And the difference between us is that we have evolved our interpretation of our faith, and they have not, basically. But it is not a diss towards anything. It's just their faith, and that has to be respected. And I do respect their faith the same way that he has respected mine, because he does not bash and he does not go against my support of LGBTQA+. He totally respects that. If he does not think of me less just because I support that, and I have supported that in according to my faith as well, because this is what I believe of my God. And the same thing is true for him. If you reverse that, for him, this is what he believes. That's what his faith dictates. And because of that, I also respect him for it. But it's an interesting, there are two aspects to this. One is that how there's an interesting contrast, not contrast, but there's two faces to Brunei. That comfortable, secure life, but not a lot of freedom. That's very much reversed in countries like the West, like the US, where there's a lot of freedom relative to what they enjoy, but there's not a lot of comfort or support when it comes to the lifestyle, basic necessities. And on the other hand, it's just the belief. They have their set of belief according to their faith, the same way Christians do, or other religions do, or other faith do, not necessarily religion, but depending on our faith. So it's just an interesting balance. But as I've said, I respect their faith the same way I would, of course, appreciate and expect that they respect mine. Now, it all depends on you, of course. Will you visit a country where LGBTQ rights are not supported? And will you use oil, which because Brunei is not the only Arab country where homosexuality, LGBTQA rights are not supported. But Brunei is a very, very good example. Will you support oil? Even though you know that it's making countries who don't support LGBTQA+ rights, like Brunei.